My name is Elena Carter. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I was the person my family called when something went wrong. A broken water heater. A late mortgage payment. A medical bill nobody wanted to discuss. A business idea my younger brother suddenly believed would make him rich. If there was a problem, somebody eventually said the same sentence. Call Elena. She'll figure it out. And for years, I did. I didn't think of myself as the family's safety net. I thought I was simply being a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. That changed on a Tuesday morning when my mother called me after nearly 8 months of barely speaking. Her voice was unusually soft. Elena, sweetheart, we need you to come home this weekend. I was sitting in my office, staring at a spreadsheet when she said it. Why? There was a pause. Then she said, it's about the house. My parents' house. The house I'd spent 10 years helping them keep. The house where I'd grown up. The house I had quietly paid the mortgage on for the last 11 months because my father's construction company had collapsed. The house that, according to the documents sitting in my desk drawer, was partly mine. I asked my mother one simple question. What happened to the house? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said something that made the back of my neck go cold. Your brother says you've agreed to sell it. I almost laughed. I hadn't. I had never agreed to sell it. Not once. And that's when I realized something. They weren't calling me home to discuss the house. They were calling me home because they believed the house was already theirs to sell. And they had no idea what I had discovered 2 days earlier. My name wasn't just on the mortgage. It was on the deed. And somebody had already tried to remove it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people discover extraordinary truths hiding inside the families they trusted. If you've ever been expected to fix everything simply because you're the responsible one, stay with me. Because what happened at my parents' dining table that Saturday changed the way I understood my family forever. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to know how I became the person everyone expected to rescue them. Because people don't suddenly become the family bank. They're trained into it. And my training started when I was 14. My father, Richard Carter, owned a small construction company in a town outside Charlotte. He wasn't rich. But when I was growing up, he looked rich to me. He drove a black pickup. He wore expensive-looking boots. He took clients to steakhouses. He talked about buying another truck, hiring more workers, expanding into commercial construction. My mother, Diane, stayed home and managed the house. And then there was my younger brother, Mason. Mason was 4 years younger than me. My parents called him their dreamer. I was the responsible one. Mason could say, I want to try something, and everyone would smile. I could say, we should probably look at the numbers first, and everyone would sigh. When Mason was 16, my father bought him a motorcycle. When I was 16, I bought myself a used laptop with money from a part-time job. When Mason wanted to attend an expensive private college, my parents said they would figure it out. When I wanted to attend college, I applied for scholarships. I wasn't angry about it then. At least, I told myself I wasn't. I actually liked being dependable. There was something comforting about knowing that if everything fell apart, I could put it back together. That feeling became stronger after college. I studied accounting and eventually became a financial controller for a regional logistics company. It wasn't glamorous. But I was good at it. I understood numbers, contracts, cash flow, debt, the things people ignored until they became emergencies. My parents loved that about me, especially when they needed something. The first time my father asked me for money, I was 22. His company had a payroll problem. He needed $8,000 for less than 2 weeks. It's not a loan, he told me. It's family helping family. I transferred the money. 2 weeks became 2 months. Then 3. Eventually, he paid me back. But something had changed. I'd crossed a line. I had shown everyone that I could solve problems with money. After that, the requests became easier. My mother's dental work. Mason's car repair. A business deposit. A credit card balance. A vacation my parents said they desperately needed after a difficult year. I didn't notice the pattern at first, because every request came with a reason. And every reason sounded temporary. Until one evening, when I was 32, my father called me. "Your brother has an opportunity." Those words should have terrified me. They did. Mason wanted to buy a small gym. He had never managed a gym. He had never managed a business. He didn't have enough savings. But he had enthusiasm. He needed $60,000. My father wanted me to co-sign the loan. I refused. Not angrily. Not dramatically. I simply said no. My father went silent. Then he said, "You have plenty of money. That isn't the point. You're his sister." "I know." "Then act like it." I remember sitting in my car outside my apartment that night, staring through the windshield. I had heard that sentence my entire life. Act like family. What nobody ever explained was why acting like family always seemed to mean sacrificing something I had earned. I didn't co-sign. Mason's gym never happened. For almost 8 months, my parents barely spoke to me. Then my father had a stroke. It wasn't fatal. But it changed everything. His company struggled. He couldn't work the same hours. The bills increased. And suddenly, the house became the center of every conversation. My parents had bought that house when I was 6. It was a 2-story brick home with a white porch and an enormous oak tree in the backyard. It wasn't luxurious. But it was home. When my father's business started failing, the mortgage became difficult. My mother asked me for help. I agreed to cover the mortgage for 6 months. 6 months became 11. I never complained. I never reminded them. I simply paid. But I made one mistake. I insisted on documenting every payment. Not because I wanted the house. Because I had learned that family memories were not legal agreements. My father had signed a refinancing agreement years earlier. Because my credit was stronger, the bank required me to become a co-borrower. Later, during another refinancing, my father insisted that I be added to the deed. "It's your home too," he told me. I remember those exact words. Your home too. I didn't think much about them. Until 2 days before my mother's phone call. I was reviewing some old financial documents in my home office when I found the deed. My name was there. Richard Carter. Diane Carter. Elena Carter. 3 names. 1 property. I stared at the document for several minutes. Then I checked the county records online. Same thing. I was a legal owner. That was when I remembered something else. My mother had called me 3 weeks earlier asking me to send her a copy of my driver's license. She said the bank needed it. I had refused. She sounded annoyed. I didn't think much about it. Until I found an email in my spam folder from a title company. The subject line was, "Document correction request, Carter property." I opened it. My stomach dropped. Someone had submitted paperwork claiming I had transferred my interest in the house. My signature was on the document. Except it wasn't my signature. It looked close. Very close. But it wasn't mine. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Someone had attempted to remove me from ownership of my parents' house. And suddenly my mother's phone call made sense. "Your brother says you've agreed to sell it." I hadn't agreed to anything. But Mason apparently had. That Saturday, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't tell them what I knew. Not yet. I wanted to hear their story first. The house looked exactly the same. White porch. Oak tree. My mother's flower pots. My father's old work boots near the garage. For a second, I was 14 again. Then I saw Mason's car. A new black SUV. He stepped out wearing sunglasses and a designer jacket. I hadn't seen him in months. He hugged me. Too warmly. "Elena." Finally. I noticed something immediately. He wasn't surprised to see me. He looked relieved. Like someone had been waiting for a package. My mother opened the front door. "Elena, sweetheart." She hugged me tightly. My father sat at the dining table. He looked older than I remembered. There were papers spread across the table. My mother pointed toward a chair. Sit. I Saturday. Mason sat across from me. My father looked at everyone. Then he said, "We're going to solve the house situation today." I nodded. Okay. Mason smiled. Good. My mother poured tea. Nobody drank it. My father pushed a folder toward me. We have an offer. I opened the folder. A real estate purchase agreement. The buyer was a development company. Purchase price: $485,000. My father's eyes stayed on me. We can finally get out from under the mortgage. I turned the page. Then another. Then another. Something was wrong. The document listed my father and mother as sellers. My name wasn't there. I looked up. Where am I? My mother blinked. What do you mean? I'm listed on the deed. Silence. Mason shifted in his chair. My father looked down. Then he said, "That was taken care of." I felt my heartbeat slow. What does that mean? Mason answered, "You signed the transfer." I looked directly at him. No, I didn't. He sighed. "Elena, please don't make this difficult." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because suddenly everything was clear. They weren't asking me to sell the house. They believed they had already taken my ownership away. I closed the folder. "Show me the transfer document." My mother said, "There's no reason to get hostile." I'm not hostile. I looked at my father. "I want to see the document." He hesitated. Mason stood up. "Why are you acting like we're stealing from you?" I didn't answer. Because the question itself was ridiculous. I looked at my mother. "Who prepared the transfer?" She looked at Mason. Mason looked at my father. My father finally said, "Your brother handled the paperwork." There it was. The first crack. I opened my phone. I had brought the email from the title company. I placed it on the table. "Then explain this." Mason's face changed. Just slightly. But I saw it. The confidence disappeared. My mother picked up the phone. "What is this?" "A title company asking me to confirm a transfer I never signed." My father stared at Mason. "Mason?" My brother's jaw tightened. "It's a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" He didn't answer. I stood. "I'm leaving." My mother grabbed my wrist. "No. Please." I looked at her hand. Then at her face. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about pulling away. "I came here because you said we needed to talk about the house." "We do." "No." I shook my head. "You needed me to approve something you already decided to do." My father spoke quietly. "Your brother is in trouble." I looked at him. "What kind of trouble?" Nobody answered. Then Mason finally said, "I have debts." "How much?" He looked away. "About $190,000. I sat back down. Not because I wanted to help. Because I needed to understand. "What debts?" He began explaining. "Credit cards. Personal loans. Business debts. A private lender. A failed online business. A failed gym concept. A car loan. A line of credit." It was a disaster. But then I asked the question that changed everything. "Why would selling the house solve your debt?" Mason didn't answer. My father did. "We were going to use part of the money." "Part?" My mother whispered. "Mason owes people money." I looked at her. How much of the $485,000 was going to him? Nobody spoke. I turned the purchase agreement toward myself. The closing instructions were attached. I read them carefully. Then I found the distribution schedule. My parents were supposed to receive approximately $180,000 after debts. The rest was allocated to liens and other obligations. But there was another name. A private creditor. Mason owed that person $112,000. And that creditor had been given priority. I looked up. "Who is this?" Mason went pale. My father said, "It's a business partner." "No." I pointed at the document. "This isn't a business partner." Nobody moved. "This is a private lender." Mason said nothing. I knew then that the house wasn't simply being sold to help my brother. It was being sold because someone was coming for him. And my parents had decided the easiest solution was to use the house. The house they had spent years telling me was my home too. My mother began crying. Elena, we didn't know what else to do. I looked at her. You could have asked me. We did. No. I shook my head. You asked me to send my ID. She looked down. That was different. No, Mom. I stood again. That was the plan. Mason slammed his hand against the table. You think you're better than everyone. The room went silent. I looked at him. No. I think I was the only person in this family who read the paperwork. He stared at me. Then he said something I would never forget. You've always had money. Why shouldn't we use it? There was no anger in his voice anymore. Only entitlement. And somehow that hurt more. I picked up my purse. Because it's mine. My father stood. Elena. I stopped. He looked exhausted. Please. That one word almost broke me. My father had never said please to me. Not when he needed money. Not when he needed a cosigner. Not when he needed help. He always told me what family required. Now he was asking. I turned around. I'll help you. Everyone froze. Mason's expression changed. My mother started crying harder. My father took a breath. But not with the house. Mason immediately said, What does that mean? It means I'll help Dad and Mom find a solution to their debt. I looked directly at him. But I won't pay your private lender. His face hardened. You're unbelievable. No. I shook my head. I'm finally believable. I left. But I wasn't finished. That evening, I contacted an attorney. I gave her every document. The deed. The attempted transfer. The title company email. The purchase agreement. The distribution schedule. She read everything. Then she looked at me. You realize what this is, don't you? I nodded. An attempted fraudulent transfer. She nodded. And if your signature was forged, this could become very serious. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. So we notified the title company that I had never authorized the transfer. The sale was frozen. The buyer's attorney demanded an explanation. My parents panicked. Mason disappeared. For 6 days, I heard nothing. Then my mother called. Elena, please come over. I almost didn't go. But I did. When I arrived, the house felt different. There were boxes everywhere. My father's office had been emptied. My mother's china was wrapped in newspaper. The house was already being prepared for sale. Except now they couldn't sell it. My father sat in the living room. He looked smaller. Elena. I sat across from him. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. It was handwritten. My father's handwriting. I wrote this years ago, he said. I unfolded it. He had written it after adding me to the deed. The letter said that he wanted me to have part of the house because I had helped keep the family together. But there was another sentence. One that made me stop breathing. I know I've asked too much of you. I looked up. My father was crying. Not dramatically. Not to manipulate me. Just crying. I knew, he said. I knew we were making you responsible for things that weren't yours. I didn't know what to say. He continued. I told myself it was temporary. I whispered. It wasn't. No. He shook his head. It wasn't. For the first time, my father admitted what I had known for years. I had become the solution to every problem because everyone else had become comfortable with not being one. Then he said something unexpected. Mason wasn't the one who forged your signature. I froze. What? My father looked toward the kitchen. Your mother did. I couldn't move. What? He closed his eyes. She signed the document. I stared at him. Why? Because Mason told her that if he didn't pay the lender, they would hurt him. I felt sick. Mom forged my signature. He nodded. She thought she was saving your brother. I stood. Where is she? He looked at me. Upstairs. I found my mother sitting on the edge of her bed. She looked exhausted. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why she hated me. I asked one question. Why didn't you ask me? She covered her face. Because I knew you'd say no. That answer was worse than anything else. She knew. She knew I would say no. And instead of respecting my answer, she decided to make my no meaningless. I sat beside her. You didn't need my permission because you didn't believe I had the right to say no. She started crying. I was scared. I know. I thought if Mason lost everything, he'd hurt himself. I won't repeat the details of what she said next. But I understood the fear behind it. She had made a terrible choice because she believed she was preventing a crisis. That didn't make the choice right. Fear explains a decision. It doesn't erase responsibility for it. I told her that. Then I left. 2 weeks later, the truth came out. Mason had been hiding far more debt than anyone knew. The private lender had threatened legal action. The gym idea had never existed as a real business. Mason had used borrowed money to cover other borrowed money. The house sale was supposed to be the final escape. Except the house wasn't entirely theirs. It was mine too. And that one fact stopped the entire plan. My parents eventually hired a financial counselor. They sold several assets. They downsized. My father formally closed his company. My mother took a part-time job. Mason moved out of state. He never apologized. Not directly. Months later, I received a letter from him. 3 pages. Most of it explained why he believed I had misunderstood everything. At the bottom was one sentence. I still think family should help family. I didn't respond. Because I finally understood something. Family should help family. But help isn't the same as surrender. Love isn't ownership. And forgiveness isn't permission to repeat the same behavior. A year later, I went back to the house. My parents had sold it legally. This time, I signed the papers. Not because anyone forced me. Because I chose to. My share of the sale allowed me to pay off the remaining mortgage balance and keep a portion of the money. My parents moved into a smaller home. It wasn't the house I grew up in. But it was theirs. And for the first time, it was theirs without pretending I owed them something for it. My father and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. Not like before. Better than before. There were boundaries. Real ones. He stopped asking me for money. I stopped offering money before anyone asked. We started having conversations that didn't involve bills. Sometimes he called just to tell me about his garden. Sometimes I called to ask how his knee was doing. It was strange at first. Then it became normal. My mother took longer. She wanted forgiveness immediately. I couldn't give it immediately. I told her that. She eventually understood. Mason. I haven't seen him in 3 years. I heard he started working for a construction company in Arizona. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he hasn't. I don't know. And for the first time, I don't feel responsible for finding out. The strangest part is that I don't regret helping my family. I regret helping them without boundaries. There's a difference. If someone you love is drowning, you can throw them a rope. You don't have to jump into the water and let them pull you under. That Saturday, my family thought they were selling my house. What they actually sold was the version of me who believed love required proof. The version who believed saying no made me selfish. The version who believed being needed was the same thing as being loved. I lost that version of myself. And honestly, it was the best thing I ever lost. Because now when someone says, family helps family, I don't hear. Family gives up everything. I hear. Family tells the truth. Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't secretly plan your financial ruin and call it love. And most importantly, family doesn't make you earn your place at the table. You already belong there. If you've ever been the responsible one, the fixer, the person everyone calls when something goes wrong, remember this. You are allowed to help. You are allowed to say no. And you're allowed to protect the life you spent years building. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is stop rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. Because when you stop carrying everyone else, you finally discover how strong you were without the weight. And that Saturday, when I walked out of my parents' house with my name still on the deed and my dignity still intact, I realized something I wish I'd understood when I was 14. Being a good daughter never required me to become everyone's insurance policy. I was their daughter, not their bank, not their emergency fund, not their escape plan, just their daughter. And finally, that was enough. If this story reminded you of someone in your own family, share it with them. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, tell me in the comments. Sometimes the hardest word in a family isn't goodbye. It's simply, no.